Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I feel like I haven't done a live stream in quite a while, so I hope I'm doing everything right. Of course I am. Who am I kidding? Today I want to talk about a topic that I have never talked about on here, but which I personally find quite interesting. And without letting my guest wait too long, I just want to say hello. Lex, Ex-Mo Lex. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm very happy to have you here. Ex-Mo Lex stands for Ex-Mormon Lex, right?
Yes.
I'm so smart. I figured this out. So you are an ex-Mormon. I'm an ex-Muslim. When we say ex-Mormon, what exactly does that mean? Like, were you a practicing Mormon in the past? If you just want to give a background information of yourself and who you are so that we know who we are talking to, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the Mormon church. I was born into it. And I was raised that way my entire life. My parents and my family were very, very active. And I'm actually a seventh generation Mormon. So my family has been part of the Mormon church since the very, very beginning. And I continued being a Mormon up until I was 25 years old. And at that point, I'd been married in the church to another Mormon and had 4 children. And it wasn't until I started looking a little bit more deeply into my beliefs that I started questioning and eventually left.
When was that? When did you leave?
It would have been September of 2018, I believe. So I would have been 25.
Oh, that was very precise. I would never remember when I left my faith. I was just
I
asking
I
approximately.
remember it pretty clearly because it was right before the Mormons have one of their general conferences, which happens in, I think, April and October. And so it was like the very, very beginning of October. And it happened very suddenly. It wasn't gradual. And so I remember it pretty well.
Oh, yeah. Is it was it how can I say that? Is it traumatic? Was it traumatic? Was it like very stressful, scary when
Yeah,
you left, before you left? Was it a rough phase, and how long did it take?
it was very difficult. It was very traumatic. I would say from the time that I very first started questioning until I was like 100% done was within the space of a couple of weeks. Like it was very quick, but it took me several months after that to sort of come to terms with it and go from grieving the religion and missing what I once had to accepting that actually I enjoy my life this way and I'm happy that I've left.
Well, that's good to know. By the way, I just want to. I normally don't want to bring anything from my side into this right now because I want to hear more about Mormonism. But Brother Ben said AP is only 4 minutes late. That must be some kind of record, and I think that's very significant. It's true. Normally, I'm like 10, 15 minutes late, so something's happening today. Uh, so, why is it called Mormonism? What is Mormon exactly? Where does that come from?
So it comes from the Book of Mormon, which is, well, the Mormons believe that it's an ancient record of the Americas that Joseph Smith found. And Mormon is a character in the Book of Mormon. He's the one that sort of compiled it. And so Mormonism and calling them Mormons comes from the Book of Mormon. And it's a nickname that just kind of has stuck around. Although Mormons don't like to be called Mormons anymore, they started having their prophet sort of having a campaign against that a couple of years ago. They like you to call them by their full name, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is obviously a mouthful. So most people just say Mormon.
Yeah. Do they refer to each other as saints? Is that a common thing?
We do. And honestly, it's kind of something that bothers me is it's not a very humble practice to go around calling yourselves saints.
Yeah. I remember, I guess to the credit of my old mysticist Islamic upbringing, it was like I was supposed to consider myself very lowly. And when I now see that, like when I see Mormons depicted as referring to themselves as saints and to each other as saints, I'm like, wow,
Yeah,
that's not how I was religious.
I thought the same thing when they started doing that.
Yeah. It's actually funny. I had the idea of contacting you and talking about Mormonism because several years ago, I first, when I took a religion class and I went into Mormonism and I studied a little bit of it, I felt a little bit disturbed and honestly disgusted by Mormonism, despite my um, Muslim past, despite my situation as an ex-Muslim, where I'm very disgusted with my former religion. But I thought, wow, I didn't expect this at all to come from to come out of America, and just stuff about Joseph Smith and the Mormon history. Um, but only recently there was actually a show on Hulu, which is under the banner of heaven. I thought, wow, this looks like a very interesting show. So I started watching it, and I was amazed by that show. And suddenly this whole interest in studying and analyzing Mormonism came back. You watched that show too, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, because I came across your review on YouTube when I looked for it. What do you think? Is it like, do you think that show has a very much accurate depiction of Mormonism and Mormons and Utah and all that?
I personally believe that it is pretty accurate. Obviously, the show is set like in the 80s, and so Utah and Mormonism now looks different than it did back then. And the way that they talk about Mormonism as it was then and the way they depict families then was very familiar to me growing up in the church in the 90s. And, I've seen some people complain that, maybe it was a little bit corny. And there's certain things that I can agree were corny, but Mormons are kind of corny, and they especially were during that time period. As far as the way they depict Joseph Smith and the early, history of the church, I thought that was extremely interesting. As somebody raised in the church, we only talked about Joseph Smith in a good light. There were no movies that we watched or depictions of him that we saw that were anything but absolutely glowing praise. And, learning more about the church after leaving, it's easy to see that we were obviously very biased in Joseph Smith's favor and in the early Mormons' favor. And so I don't know. To me, I thought it was fair. It was a fair representation on both sides, not only from the standpoint of, people back then were very horrible to the early Mormons. And I thought that that was depicted well. I didn't think that there was like this huge bias against Mormons. Obviously, it showed real history. But the way that they depicted people being aggressive and terrible to Mormons, I thought was really good too. So, in my personal opinion, I think that it was a great show. And I think that it was pretty accurate.
Um, I've noticed some parallels there to my past with Islam. It's like you mentioned that as Mormons or from the church, you only get the good things about
Yeah.
Joseph Smith, and full of praise and glowing and all that. It was kind of similar with us, where everything that Muhammad did is praised and depicted as just wonderful, great, holy. Everything is justified, and then when you actually go into the sources and look into them, then you discover all the abhorrent stuff. When it comes to Joseph Smith, the history that is discovered, to me looks like he was just some regular guy who was knowledgeable, who pursued knowledge, but who also seemingly, uh, with his delusions or malintentions, created a religion for himself and made up revelations as he went. And I believe there was also um, a matter of marrying women that he couldn't marry or marrying more than one woman, or marrying underage women and girls and all that involved, right?
Yeah.
How do you see it? Like, do you think that the whole motive of him founding this religion is based on some self-interest?
It's hard to say. I personally think that for the most part, he probably had a very big ego. Um, I think that he, the way he was raised and the things he was doing in his early life showed that, people back then obviously were very superstitious, and he played into that a lot, and he used it to his advantage. And I think that he was probably a very charismatic person. And I think people probably gravitated towards him. And he learned early on how to take advantage of that and how to manipulate people and how to get what he wanted. And I think that him creating a religion initially was probably a way for him to gain power and influence, to make money. He ran for president at one point. He wanted to be powerful. He wanted to have his own army. And so I think that Joseph Smith, as a person, wasn't this like humble and contrite person that the Mormons usually think of him as. I think he was more of like a power hungry type of person that wanted to have power over other people, that wanted to have riches, that wanted to have his own, harem of women. And so it might have been like something that started a little bit smaller, but as he gained popularity, his ideas became grander and grander. And he obviously took certain things in his life and applied them to the religion. For example, becoming a Freemason and then taking what he learned of Freemasonry and applying it to Mormonism. So I think it just kind of grew and grew as it went.
Yeah, it's very very interesting. It's like you can clearly see that the religion forms and develops as he goes. But when you look at it from the outside, when you critically analyze it, you can view this as some guy just establishing his own religion. But I guess from a Mormon perspective, this is just God's plan to
Right.
create the religion this way, or sorry, Heavenly Father. Is that a common thing that Mormons say Heavenly Father rather than just God?
They do say both, but Heavenly Father is typically used because it's like more respectful. And I think that a lot of Mormons view it as like more personal than just saying God, like this is my Heavenly Father who loves me as his child, kind of a thing.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Speaking of Heavenly Father, there are some major differences between Mormon theology and regular Christian theology, and I didn't even know this before I took a course on Mormonism. I was shocked, honestly, about the major differences on how Mormons view the nature of God and of Jesus and all that. It blew my mind a little bit, because I thought it's just regular Christianity with some later, inventions and perversions by Joseph Smith. But no. So Mormonism is regarded non-Trinitarian, and there's a whole thing, right? That the Heavenly Father is the major creator, and Jesus wasn't a co-eternal God. He was a human, and he became God. Do you want to, without me messing it up, do you want to go ahead and make an attempt at describing the theology of this?
Yeah, I can talk a bit about it. It is very convoluted and there's like a lot to it. So I can give you kind of the quick version. But basically, Mormons believe that God came up with this plan called the plan of salvation, where everybody would come down to earth and, learn and grow. And if they made really good choices, they could eventually make it to the highest level of heaven. If they made bad choices, they would go to what they call outer darkness, which is hell. And there are like tiers of heaven within Mormonism. So they've got like VIP heaven, mid-tier heaven, low heaven, and hell, that sort of thing. And there's even like tiers within the tiers, but we won't get into all of that. They believe that Satan, who was a son of God, and that, this is the weird part. That all is, but
Oh no,
as the only begotten Son of Christ. So the only
sorry, can you repeat that part? You were frozen for a minute.
The part about Jesus or Satan or
who was the only begotten Son? Who was the Son?
Jesus. They say
Okay.
the begotten Son of God. And, we were all up with God in heaven before we came here to earth. There was basically a fight between the people who wanted to follow Satan, whose plan was for everybody to not have any choices and just be forced to do the right thing. And then Jesus, who thought everybody should have a choice and get to choose between right and wrong. So they believed that those who followed Satan's plan were cast out of heaven, and the rest of us came here to earth. And then they believe, obviously, after we die, we have this opportunity to go to one of these tiers of heaven. The people who make it to the very, very tippy top, the best people, can become gods as God did, have their own planet, and do basically the same thing. And they believe that not only is that possible, but our God, our Heavenly Father, is one of infinite gods, infinite planets, infinite everything, and that this cycle just continues without end and always has.
Wow. That was the first thing that I noticed when I was studying it. I was like, wait a minute, this is not okay. This doesn't go into the whole Abrahamic understanding of the one God and all of that. It's like, wait a minute. So if I die as a very good Mormon, I can also become a god and can also have my own dependence and create my own planets and my own people. So I can do the whole thing. It's like it's like a simulation game, but in real. After I die, I become alive, and then I can do the same thing that God once did.
Yeah.
And that is so weird.
It is. The thing is that as a Mormon, we don't view it that way. Like, other people obviously hear that and they're like, that's insane, that's nothing like Christianity. But I feel like Mormons justify this by saying, well, we're still a monotheistic religion because we only worship one God and we don't worship other gods. It's just our one that we worship, even if we believe that we can become a god at some point. And this teaching is also something that they have tried to distance themselves from in recent years, because people hear about it and go, well, that's insane. Obviously, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll look at their history and you'll see many times where they mention this theology. And then in more recent years, they try to be like, no, we never said that. We don't believe that.
Speaking of changes, so in Mormonism, you don't just have the one last prophet, Joseph Smith. There is also a constantly ongoing prophethood, right?
Yes.
So there is currently a Mormon prophet, one true prophet.
Yeah, his name is Russell M. Nelson. He's in his 90s.
and that is the head of the church.
Yeah.
And since there is a prophet right now, that also means that revelations still come and the religion can still change and develop, right?
Yes. I would say that the ways it changes in recent years are more subtle, but even if you look at the church, 60, 70, 80 years ago, it was very, very different than it is now.
That's so interesting. From the outside, you could look at it and say that there is a human at the top, and they can basically just do whatever they want, and they can turn it into whatever they want. But if you are a Mormon and you believe that this is God's plan, then you also believe that there is no risk involved of a human just creating his own thing, because this is God's plan.
Right. We're taught in the church growing up that there is no way that our living prophet could lead the church astray. We're taught that if that were to ever happen, or if he was ever going to lead the church astray, that God would basically just take him out. So within the church, you don't view it as just a person. You view this guy as the mouthpiece of the living God.
There is this one teaching that kind of that they were trying to get rid of. I guess it's connected to the whole thing, to the whole I don't know, God, multiple gods and all that. But there is a strange distinction in Mormonism, I believe, where between Elohim and Jehovah and something. But there is a certain teaching. I don't know what. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
You mean like God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost?
Yeah, it's weird that they use these Elohim and Jehovah and all of that distinctly, and
Yeah.
uh, create a strange theology out of that. Yeah. Anyway, um, what is it with one of the big controversies that people mention in relationship to Mormonism is that Mormonism had in its history and in its fundamental teachings a lot of hostilities, racism, discrimination, and that also violence was committed in the name of Mormonism in the
Yeah.
past. Um, is it true that that Mormonism is fundamentally racist? That it kind of has this whole white Mormons are holy saints and Native Americans are evil and so on. What is
Yeah.
that all about?
It's this is another teaching that they've really tried to back off from, obviously because it's very, very unpopular and does not win them very much support. But in the very, very beginning, if you read through the Book of Mormon, every time there's somebody that's doing something bad, um, basically a curse will be put upon them that curses them with dark skin. And so they believe that these people, these ancient Jews that came to the Americas, became the natives here, and that their skin was dark because they were cursed by God. They also taught that if the people were to repent and become righteous again, their skin would turn white, and they would be what they call white and delightsome. And that's something that it's still in the Book of Mormon, and they used to talk about it more. They've backed off on it a lot, and now they like to claim that, like, well, skin doesn't really mean skin. It's talking about like their countenance being light versus dark, even though the word used is skin. And if you go back and look at some of like maybe around the 60s and 70s, they would have like handbooks and things and audio recordings and all these sorts of things that talk about specifically that if people have dark skin and they're good, it will turn light and vice versa. So it's something that they if you asked a current Mormon about it, especially if they were younger and didn't really know about the previous history, they would be like, oh no, we absolutely don't believe that. However, it has been taught for decades and something that is still in the Book of Mormon today.
Is that a teaching, or are things like these completely unfamiliar to average Mormons today, or do people know about these things but just have the average opinion that that you are just misunderstanding what is being
I think that for the most part, people would know about it. I mean, everybody reads the Book of Mormon, so everybody at some point has read those verses, because it's not just one or two. It happens again and again throughout the book. But I think that they would just say, well, they have a lot of like different excuses for it. And how much do you know about the ban against Black people having the priesthood or Black people entering the temple? Because that's something that a lot of younger Mormons don't know much about since they changed that in the 70s. But that was something that went along for a very long time as well, where they didn't allow Black people to basically receive covenants that allow you to get into heaven. And they didn't change that until quite recently.
what is the what's the implication there? So they have dark skin, they're cursed, they are lesser, but does it also mean that it is not really possible for them to attain the same level in heaven through believing in the truth? Or
At some point, yeah, that would have been the belief. There's a lot of like older Mormon books that if you look, and read through them, you'll be able to find these sorts of teachings. One I can think of in particular is where it was taught in a book published by the church that the reason that people have dark skin, the reason that some people are Black, is because in the pre-existence before we were born, they were basically siding with Satan and agreeing with him, and therefore they are. And it goes on to talk about how part of that is not only the color of their skin, but they're also born with like less desirable circumstances. And again, they didn't change that, or they didn't allow Black people to make those certain covenants and go through the temple and receive the priesthood and have these blessings until they felt pressured to do so because the teaching was so racist.
This is so messed up. It's like people often talk about white supremacy, and people use that very loosely. But this is an actual instance of a religion directly teaching that white-skinned people are superior. They're blessed. They're chosen, and
Yeah.
the others are basically lesser, and poor
And
them. They were cursed.
this whole thing, I feel like, I mean, most Mormons will know about the priesthood ban, but they won't know specifically why that was a thing, because some of this literature they stopped publishing or stopped printing, a couple decades ago, and the church has backed off on it so much and has made an effort to appear very, very welcoming and to change that. And so Mormons who know anything about it will say, well, that wasn't God. That was just, the mistakes of man. We don't, God isn't racist. We don't believe that. But most Mormons, I would say, probably don't really know where those teachings came from, or that maybe they even existed at all.
This is so funny. It reminds me of lots of the responses that I get from Muslims. Often, like, "Oh no, you're just not understanding the
Right.
context," and this doesn't actually mean that people that did that for different reasons.
Right.
It's there is such similarity. It's a little bit disgusting. How about the issue of slavery? Does Mormonism have a position, a history with it?
There's definitely been some, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit contended, but the Brigham Young, who was the second prophet of the church, was very much in favor of slavery. He considered it, awful, terrible, basically apostasy type stuff if somebody that was Black and somebody that was white tried to get married. He was a very, very racist man, and he wasn't quiet about it. But again, that is so early in church history, and it's something that the church has whitewashed so thoroughly that most Mormons don't really know about it. I would say that it's becoming more well known in this day and age where we now have access to the internet. But I didn't hear anything about that until 3 or 4 years ago. So it's not common knowledge.
How does it happen that you as a believing devout Mormon person find your way toward suddenly looking at these things critically and questioning them, and then finding these different perspectives?
So it actually all started because I had a family member who I knew was struggling, and I thought that what they were struggling with was the church specifically. And so I had heard something about this thing called the CES letter that apparently had like bad stuff about the church in it. And I thought, oh, my family member must have looked into that, and now they're questioning their faith. And I have such strong faith that I'm sure I could help them. And so I read the CES letter thinking that I'm not going to be persuaded by anything. I know the church is true. And it turns out that it had a lot of questions in it that I didn't have the answers to. And when I did more research, I realized I can't stand by this religion.
That is so funny. It's so ironic.
It is.
You were married when you were a Mormon,
Yes.
and you both left, or
Yes, we did.
did you mention that and I didn't pay attention to it? I'm sorry if that's the
No.
case. But I saw videos that where you both appear and you both talk about your previous experiences, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So before we move on, I'm sorry to say this, but there is just one thing that everyone wants to ask, and I'm sure you got used to it. What about the magic underwear?
Yeah. I mean, I can answer any questions about the magic underwear.
What is that about? Like, is that
Uh,
like a do Mormons have to wear this strange looking type of underwear? And what's the point?
so yes, they do. It's only for adult Mormons who have gone through the temple and received their endowments. Basically, when you go through the temple, you make certain promises to God, and part of that is that you receive these special underwear. They're all white. They go from your knees. I mean, the pants of them, the underwear part goes all the way to your knees, and the shirt covers your shoulders and your chest and your back. It's very, very modest. And you make a covenant to God to wear those every single day. Mormons see them as protection from Satan, from evil influences, and wearing them is supposed to remind you of the covenants you make. And you are supposed to wear them day and night. And they have symbols on them that you learn in the temple. And it goes along with Freemasonry. So each symbol has like a corresponding handshake that is taken from Freemasonry. And yeah, I mean, there's some Mormons that don't wear them, that choose not to. And usually the reason is because they're incredibly uncomfortable. They cause yeast infections. They are, I mean, obviously just not pleasant to look at. And they interfere with the type of clothing that you can wear, because any clothing you wear has to cover the garments completely. So, for women that live in hot climates during the summertime, it's not fun to wear. So there are a lot of Mormons, especially more high profile and celebrity Mormons, that don't wear them every day the way they should.
So and that's so weird. So I heard rumors about this before, but I never really looked into it, or never really heard actual accounts from Mormons or ex-Mormons themselves. So this is a good confirmation of stuff that I've heard before.
Yeah.
But is this what they look like? Do they have different looks too, or is this
They
like the
come in like
same?
slightly different styles. So, some of them are mesh, some of them are more silky, like these ones. And the top sometimes, instead of having that little point, is more rounded. It's the same thing. It covers the same amount of skin, but they, slightly different styles. But these
Who
are the
did
ones
they?
that my parents had.
Oh man! Oh, did you wear these too? Like,
I did. Mine didn't look exactly like that. I had the ones that were a little bit tighter and more form-fitting because I hated the
yeah.
wrinkles on these, but I did have them, yeah.
Who the hell came up with this?
That was the Joseph Smith thing.
Is this actually found in the is this found in the Book of Mormon?
No, no. They don't talk about this at all in that.
Okay.
This is stuff that Joseph Smith made up after the fact. And like I said, it has a lot to do with when he did Freemasonry.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay.
yeah, so this is part of the temple, but it's something that you take with you for the rest of your life.
This is so stupid.
I agree. I made an effort to not wear mine as often as I could because they were extremely uncomfortable.
I guess you stick out then as a if in a Mormon society in, I don't know, in Utah, I don't know how the demographics are nowadays in Utah, but if you dress more, if you dress without stuff like this appearing from under your clothes in the summer, then it's kind of obvious that you are not a good Mormon or not a Mormon, or is
Yes.
that how it is?
And people will ask you about it. There are some people that just cannot mind their own business. There was a time where I was not wearing mine, and my in-laws brought it up later and asked my husband why I wasn't wearing them and if I was, going to go inactive in the church because of it.
That is so annoying.
I know. Imagine being asked about the underwear that you're wearing. Like, it's extremely uncomfortable, but it will get brought up.
That is horrible. It's so invasive, and
It's incredibly invasive. And
why was your wife not wearing her Mormon
your
her
special
temple
underwear.
garments, her underwear today?
Right. It's awful. And when Mormons are going to go through the temple after they've gone, their bishop will ask them questions about if they're keeping their covenants. Part of that is wearing the garments. And so if you were being honest in your temple interview, you would have to tell your bishop that I haven't been wearing my special underwear. And he would tell you that you need to in order to go through the temple again.
Weird. Um, there are certain things in certain rituals. One thing that I noticed when I watched that show, and also afterwards when I researched a little bit, there was this one sign that they made when they got married, and also in different instances, which was like this, or
Yeah.
what is that about?
Basically, and this is something that they stopped doing, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s. But part of the temple ceremony was that you would promise not to reveal the secrets of the temple. Otherwise, you would slit your throat. And there was also the same symbol across your stomach saying that you would disembowel yourself, basically. Just very, very seriously, like, you cannot tell anybody about what you learned inside the temple.
And what does that mean? What is the secret that cannot be revealed to the public? Is it like regular church stuff, or
It's the I think the most important part for them is the clothing that we wear in the temple and the secret handshakes we learn to get into heaven, which again ties back into Freemasonry. The handshakes and everything is very, very similar. Everything else that happens in the temple is honestly, as a Mormon going through for the first time, it was a disappointment because all you basically do is you watch a movie about Adam and Eve and the beginning of the earth. And it's all stuff that you've heard before, but then they just like throw in the handshakes and stuff. And that's where you learn that for the first time.
that's very, very cultish.
Yes, that's actually when we started doing that, this whole room full of people doing it and chanting and things like that. One of my thoughts was, it feels like I'm in a cult. And then I immediately had the thought like, oh my God, like, please don't smite me. I didn't mean that. And then when I got through it on the other side, I was like, no, like, this is very sacred. It's not cult-like. I don't know why I thought that. And I never told anybody because I didn't want them to think that I was possessed by Satan or something.
It's weird. Do you have this as a Mormon? Do you also have this whole thing that you are supposed to at all times control your thoughts, and
Yes.
at all times be like extremely careful how you act, and all that?
Yeah. Mormons actually, the church teaches that there is such thing as thought crime, and so you are supposed to control your thoughts. And I've seen that applied to sexual sins, anything that you think like lusting after somebody or having sexual thoughts at all, that can be seen as a sin. I've even seen it applied to like anger. There's certain emotions in the church that aren't really acceptable, and the church has taught that anger can be a sin, and so your thoughts should be kind and clean and virtuous all the time.
It's so interesting that this actually that this new religion, a relatively new religion, actually became so large and organized. It looks like a giant cult. I mean, you are controlled through the stuff that you wear as underwear.
Yeah.
You're controlled in your thoughts, and again, I'm making the parallels here, but much of it reminds me of of Islamic stuff, where in Islam you're supposed to dress a certain way. Women are supposed to always wear their headwear. Your thoughts always have to be pure. You will be judged for every single thing that you say and do and think, and so on. And there is
Yeah.
I see there are a lot of similarities there. Though now that you mention it, in Mormonism, it looks like that just came from Freemasonry and from cultish, principles in
Yeah.
general. And
Some of it, yeah.
I have people like me often compare living as a Muslim to being in a cult, and it seems like you have the same view as an ex-Mormon, that it was basically like being in
Yes.
a cult. Yeah.
I do believe that Mormonism is a cult. And I've talked about that a lot on my channel as well. And Mormons don't view it that way at all, obviously. And when I was a Mormon, I would have said, like, of course it's not a cult. That's just crazy. We're nothing like those crazy people. But viewing it from the outside looking in and knowing more about it and knowing the way that they sort of whitewash and hide and change and, don't talk about the history or don't talk about the inconsistencies makes it more obvious.
Uh-huh. How is your situation as an ex-Mormon? First off, before we get to you speaking out against Mormonism, just you as an ex-Mormon. Obviously, you have family, people that you know who are Mormons. How does leaving Mormonism impact your relationships and people's perspectives of you?
It's pretty difficult. It was very, very terrifying to tell our parents about it. And it's something that we still have just never talked about with grandparents. I don't bring it up because for 95% of my family is members of the church, and it's something that they would view as sad and offensive and difficult for them. And thankfully my family took it in stride pretty well. My parents, I still am on very good terms with them, and they know what I do online. And they're still very supportive of me and love me through it and everything. But my husband's family, they actually disowned us last year. And a lot of that came from the fact that we no longer believe the church is true and that I'm very vocal in speaking about that. And unfortunately, that's not that uncommon. I know several people personally who've dealt with similar things from their family. And it just kind of comes down to the type of Mormon or the type of family members you have, whether or not they're going to accept you and love you no matter what, or shun you and disown you.
I understand. I'm sad to hear. I'm sorry to hear that. If it makes you feel any better, as an ex-Muslim, we also have it very terribly. Many people receive death threats. We are being disowned. I lost lots of people that I used to be connected to. My relationship with my parents is completely broken down and horrible now. So
Sorry.
yeah,
That's really hard.
it's cool. Uh, I don't know. I guess I can make light of it. That's the best thing I can do. Um, yeah, that's a weird thing. I remember watching a brief excerpt of some guys who left Mormonism, and they were basically explaining that if you live in Utah and you leave Mormonism, then you have basically committed suicide.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, especially in a very, very Mormon community. Like if you were living in Utah, and like 90% of your neighbors are Mormon. For us, when we left the church, we did lose a lot of our social group because those people no longer want to have anything to do with you once you're no longer a member. In the Mormon church, your congregation is all of the Mormons that live the closest to you. And so if you have a lot of Mormons in your neighborhood and you leave the church, you are going to lose a lot of your neighborhood friends, a lot of, the people that you spend a lot of time with. So, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. And, lucky for us, we ended up moving away from where we were pretty soon after we left the church. So we didn't have to deal with having zero friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel the worst for people who live in the middle of Utah County where most people around you are Mormon. If people find out that you've left, there can definitely be a stigma attached to that.
Is and the reason is not just that people want to keep you within the folds of Mormonism. It's also the view of people or life outside Mormonism, right? How is it, for example, in if you are in if I live in Utah, for example, and I'm surrounded by Mormons, and I'm not a Mormon, and apparently it's known that I'm not a Mormon, is there an attempt by the community to try to pursue me and try to make me a Mormon too, or something like that?
Yeah, there definitely could be. I would say that there's a bit of that, but there's also a bit of if this person is not, accepting that or, showing interest in that. And especially if you were to be outspoken and be like, no, I absolutely don't believe that or anything like that, then there would be much more of like an avoidance, because they do have a lot of fear of the outside world and fear of people who have left the church or people who are, in any way against the church or against religion in general. So like, atheists, that would be like very scary, absolutely do not interact kind of a thing.
Uh-huh.
But there is the possibility of them sending missionaries and seeing if they could start a conversation. And if you are, at all okay with that or invite them into your home, they might never leave you alone.
Oh, that's fun. I always thought if Mormons come to my door to preach to me, I would love to just say, "Hey, come in, let's talk."
Yeah.
I'm still waiting. I don't know why nobody came. uh, so they refer to their own community and their own church as the one true church, as far as I gather it. What is the view of Christianity in general? Is the view that that non-Mormon Christians are ignorant, deluded, that Christianity was corrupted or something? What is what's going on there?
Yeah, they basically view other Christians as like they only have part of the truth. We have like the fullness of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, and they only have part of it. And so, for the most part, they don't view them as like bad people or anything like that. They just think that they're misled and they don't have the full truth. But if they learn the full truth, then they would want to become a member of our church because we have the full truth.
But what happens to those who don't? But what happens to the average Christian? Like
So
what
they
is their destination? Oh,
after they die, they if they didn't, I don't know if you know about this, but when Mormons believe that when you die, there's sort of like a trial period
uh-huh.
between going to heaven and not. So they think that at that time you can accept the gospel, and they do ordinances in the temple for people who have died, like baptisms for dead people and endowments for dead people, and things like that. But if you were to not accept that as just a regular Christian, if you were a good person who did good things, you would go to like mid-tier heaven, beneath the really good one. You'd be in like the middle. If you were a Christian, but you were still doing like bad things, if you were, a liar, an adulterer, if you were a cheater, those sorts of things, you would probably go to not like hell, but the lowest heaven, which they believe is kind of just like earth.
Well, that's generous. Yeah. Is,
Yeah.
is that the telestial? No,
Yeah, that'd be the telestial.
okay, yeah, the telestial heaven. Is that okay? That's funny.
Yeah.
What are the names of those things again?
It's the celestial, the terrestrial, and the telestial, and outer darkness. And they think that outer darkness is reserved for like the worst of the worst people. But an interesting thing is that if you're going by their theology, they don't even think that like really terrible, terrible people could be there, because in order to go to hell, you have to have a knowledge of the church being true and then decide to not abide by it. So basically,
uh,
apostates like me could be a candidate for outer darkness because I had a testimony of the truthfulness of the church and I walked away.
Shame on you. Uh, yeah, I'm in the same situation, so yeah, welcome. Uh, there was a reference that is stuck in my head from the show, which was kind of like, wait, is that accurate? That's what I thought to myself when I heard that. But it was kind of just like a minor detail as the show was going on. They were depicting the main character's mother, and at some point she was delusionally speaking, and she said something along the lines of, "Who really needs to be saved? Jews really need to be saved. They will go to the celestial heaven together with Hitler," or something like that. That's what she said in the show, and I was like, "What the hell?" But
Yeah,
was that an accurate depiction of a Mormon understanding of things?
I don't think so. Back then, maybe. I don't think that. I think that most Mormons would view the average Jew as going to like mid-tier heaven, the terrestrial. the Hitler part was accurate. They would view him as going to the Telestial, which is crazy because you would think that he would go to hell, but in their theology, he would not.
Well, that's funny. That's funny. But if you don't believe in any of this stuff, and if you reject it, like you, for example, you'll go to the bad place. You're not as good as Hitler.
And the thing that's interesting with that too is that, you know, they have gotten in hot water for baptizing people after the dead, like Hitler, like Anne Frank. They have baptized her for the dead.
Wait, that's real? I thought that was just I heard that stuff before, but they actually do that?
They do that, yeah. It's one of the major ordinances that takes place in the temple, and they have kids start doing that. So I think when you're 11 or 12, you start going through the temple and being baptized for the dead. And they want to do everybody. So everybody that was not baptized a Mormon before they died, they are going to try to baptize them.
Does everybody mean everybody, regardless of their religious beliefs, or
everybody, regardless of their religious beliefs? Which, you know, obviously they got in hot water for that, because when people found out that they were baptizing Jews who died in the Holocaust, everybody freaked out and they were like, "Oh yeah, right. Well, we're not going to do that anymore." But according to their theology, they believe that everybody is going to get that chance.
Well, at least they're fair enough to do it for everybody and not just for.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm being. I don't know. That's funny. Somebody asked about. Wait, where was that? I wanted to ask that too at some point. AJ Montes said, "Lex, can you please discuss with AP about God's dwelling in a planet called Kolob?"
Yeah. A Kolob would basically be, you know, the highest tier of the highest tier of Mormon heaven. So the celestial kingdom, which is what they view as the highest Mormon heaven, has 3 different levels in it. The highest one would be Kolob, dwelling with God forever. And it's kind of strange because, you know, like I said, Mormons believe that you can become your own God and your own, you know, have your own planet and do all that. But they also say that you will be with God forever. And one thing that never really made sense to me as a Mormon was like, well, how can I like go do my own thing, you know, sort of leave the nest as it were, but also still be with God at the same time? I didn't really understand how that worked.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. It looks like some of the stuff just gets mixed up as it is formed. There's so much stuff I could go on for hours talking about this, but I remember that I forgot to actually talk about one important aspect, especially when comparing Mormonism with Islam. Joseph Smith, he had many wives, right?
Yes.
How many did he? Is there like a known number, or
There's not an exact number. There's more like guesstimation. But I think it's anywhere between like 35 to 50-ish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Muhammad is nothing against that. He only had 11 at once, so that's loser. Joseph Smith wins. And one of them, or some of them, were very young, right?
Yes, there were several that were underage. The youngest was 14. There were also mother-daughter pairs, and there were women that were already married to other men who he would send off on missions and then marry their wives. So, I mean, it was very gross, but again, something that most Mormons don't really know a lot about.
How is that? How does it happen? How does that happen? I mean, okay, he comes out in the beginning and starts with some revelations, while he is. What was Emma his only partner in the beginning?
Yeah.
Was it like his only girlfriend, wife, or something in the beginning?
So he married Emma, and that's all we hear about as members. Like, we only heard about Emma. We didn't realize he had any other wives. But he actually, before he even had this so-called revelation, he was already starting to take other wives. One of them, I believe, was a servant in his home who was underage, and his wife found them together in the barn. And I think he must have had probably, and I could be wrong about the number on this, but I believe he had already taken and married like 3 or 4 other women before he had this revelation. again, something that Mormons usually have no idea about, and it was one of the things that was most shocking.
Which revelation?
The revelation that men could take multiple wives. So he was doing that before the revelation that you could have multiple wives.
Yeah, and you could look at that and say, "Oh, yeah, so
That was him
that's
covering his ass.
yeah. He just invented that too because that's just what he wanted to do or what he was already doing." How is it? So, I recently read a little bit on the matter, and I think there's some controversy when it comes to the historical aspect of how Emma reacted to Joseph Smith and his marrying of multiple women and all of that. What Mormons are taught about that and what actually happened. But
Yeah.
how was it? Like, is it like was there like a disagreement or something between his wife Emma and him because of this whole issue?
So, as a Mormons, if you ever did find out about the multiple wives, you would have learned it as that Emma was just went along with it and was okay with it. And if you watch Under the Banner of Heaven, you'll see the way that they portrayed Emma clashing with Joseph on this. She was extremely unhappy with it. And yeah, the truth is that she was very unhappy with it. She didn't want to have anything to do with it. But when Joseph had this revelation, he basically, speaking for God, said that if Emma didn't comply, that she would be destroyed. Yeah. Those are the actual words. So she wasn't happy. She didn't like it. She didn't want Joseph to do this, and he did anyway. But when Joseph Smith died, Emma didn't stay with the mainstream Mormons. She splintered off into another group.
And in that group, how was the whole issue of multiple marriage? Did that exist too, or?
I actually don't know. I never learned about that one. I don't believe so because I know she didn't like it. But I think that's the RLDS. And then there was the regular LDS and the FLDS, which they portray both of those in Under the Banner of Heaven.
The FLDS is very controversial. Always has been, I guess. So multiple marriage, polygamy doesn't exist in today's Mormon church anymore. It was abolished quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, the FLDS, which is the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints church, claims that the mainline Mormons corrupted their religion in order to be accepted.
Right.
So they stuck to their fundamentals of Mormonism.
Yes. Right? The only reason that the church decided to change that was because they wanted statehood, and they were going to be denied statehood in Utah if they were not to change that. The government was pressuring them to stop doing polygamous marriages, and so that's the entire reason that changed. And Mormons in the church, you learn that God just decided to change it, and you don't hear anything about the way that the government was pressuring them or any of that. But the fundamentalists were the ones that said when that happened, they could see but God didn't say that, you said that. So they started their, splintered off from the mainstream Mormon church and became the fundamentalists.
Isn't that so funny? I mean, if that's what God wanted to do, then why didn't God just start it? Why did God give a revelation to Joseph Smith that this is
right?
That polygamy is okay, just to then later abolish it.
Right, and it hadn't even been that long at that point. It would have been like maybe 60 years. So, who knows?
That's so funny. It looks like people like Joseph Smith. I mean, he really just wanted to have a lot of sex with a lot of different women. And that was one of the main revelations that his God gave him through these revelations that he found. Speaking of revelations that he found, the belief is that he actually that he found these old tablets here in America.
Yeah.
How is that? How does it happen? Do those tablets exist?
So no, but Mormons believe that they did. Obviously, they believe that Joseph Smith found them when he was 14 years old, in the side of a hill, and the way that they explain that we don't have them anymore is they say that after Joseph Smith finished translating them, they were taken back to heaven.
Oh
So
gosh.
yeah, I mean, it's very. I don't know. I look back on it and I'm like, why did I believe that? That is ridiculous, but
That's how it is. I mean, I think back about a lot of stuff that I believed in back then, and I think, wow, I was very dumb. But it's just,
was not applying critical thinking skills. Let's
yeah,
just say.
Back to the multiple marriage. So, is it right that the fundamentalist Mormons basically just exist because of polygamy, because they are outraged that that polygamy was abolished and they want to
Yeah,
continue
well,
doing it?
the thing that's interesting about it is like I obviously don't agree with what they're doing, right? I don't agree with them taking, not even adults. They're taking young women and marrying them, multiple young women and marrying them. And I don't think that's right. But it is interesting that like if you really look at it and you look at the fact that the only reason the mainstream LDS church stopped the practice of polygamy was because of pressure from the government, that obviously shows that they're not really acting, through God, right? Because they didn't make that, God didn't make that choice. They stopped it because of the government. So I look back on, these fundamentalists back, in the like 1890s or whatever it was, and they would have seen that and been like, so the prophet isn't a true prophet because he isn't following God. He's just bending to government pressure. And so I could see like myself being in that position and going like, you know what, you're right. This church isn't true. Let's do our own splinter group. God never told us to stop doing polygamy. So I don't know. It's interesting to kind of view it through that lens because I
I
see where
know.
you're
I know
coming
it's so funny. I have this personality that I had when I was a very religious Muslim, where I just wanted to find and follow the real truth. And when I was watching that show where they kind of depict the fundamentalists and how these guys also become fundamentalists, and they talk about the problem. They talk about how the church is not truthful. They're just giving into pressure. They just care about the world. They
from.
don't obey God's laws. I had the same dilemma. I was like, I started sympathizing with what the fundamentalists are saying. I was like, well, I mean, they are right.
They are right. Yeah.
The church is not following the true thing. They are just corrupting their own religion, abolishing polygamy because they want to be accepted. The
Yes.
fundamentalists are the ones who actually stick to what the religion really is. But then when you look at what the topic is, it's polygamy on a
Yeah.
very horrible level, including marrying little girls, and I don't know. And fundamentalist Mormons still practice polygamy, right? So that's
Yeah.
still a problem that exists today.
Yes. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Keep Sweet. I think that one was on Netflix. But that one goes more into depth in, interviewing those people and people who have left that religion, that sect. And I mean, it's awful. It's terrible. It's incredibly abusive. It's just, but the thing that's strange about it, also coming from a Mormon perspective, is seeing that the way that they run that religion is exactly the way the early church was. So it's not like completely foreign to Mormons. Like that is what the church would have been had they not, decided to splinter off and make two different religions at that point.
Yeah, that's. I'm kind of in a weird place thinking about. I talked to Muslim apologists, quite a few of which many say that, I mean, Muhammad had, in case you don't know this, but the Prophet Muhammad had multiple wives, and one of them especially is known as a child. He married her when she was 6 years old and consummated the marriage when she was 9 years old, meaning he took her to bed and had sex with her when she was a 9-year-old girl. Of course, many Muslims nowadays who are brought up in today's modern times, want to deny this or reinterpret this or say, well, by 9, what we mean is actually this and this,
Well, it sounds so
But
familiar. I hate it.
yeah, but there are many Muslims today who are fundamentalists, and the issue is that fundamentalism in Islam is not like a tiny opposition like in Mormonism. It's quite out there. Like of Muslims are very much fundamentalists, and they often say, "No, that's right. Our prophet married a young woman." That's what they say. They don't say child; they say young woman, and that's okay. And there is nothing wrong with it. It's allowed, and it would be okay today too under certain circumstances if it wasn't forbidden by the law, for example. But what's funny to me is I can see that fundamentalist Mormons seem to be much more, I don't know, adamant in actually preserving and practicing that certain thing, practicing polygamy and practicing child marriage, and even talking about it as if denying them the right to marry multiple wives or to marry young girls was oppression.
Right.
Is that how they feel? Do they feel like they are being oppressed if they are not allowed to practice polygamy?
Yeah, I mean, as you'll see, like in Under the Banner of Heaven, they don't like government interference, and so the laws of this land they don't feel like should apply to them because they should be allowed to practice their religion exactly how they want to practice it. And so, when their prophet Warren Jeffs was arrested and put in prison, a lot of them viewed that as basically them being discriminated against just because of religion. Then, like, obviously, this person is incredibly abusive. He is facilitating rape. He is not a good person. They don't view it that way at all. They just think that they're being persecuted and that it's completely unfair.
So you have basically a crime ring, or just a fundamentalist religious.
Don't know if you can still hear me.
Hello. Wow. I guess Lex is gone. I hope everybody can hear me. Well, this is weird. This happened for the first time ever. I think my electricity just went out, I guess, because there's a problem. But yeah, now I'm on my phone. That's so funny. Can everybody hear me? Yes, you can hear me. That's funny. This is hilarious. This never happened before. And you know what's funny? Before the stream started, she said to me, "So if there's a connection issue, do we have a backup plan? What do we do?" And I was like, I never worry about that. And now it happens. It's like the first time somebody ever asked me something like this, and it actually happened. Wow. I thought I'm in America. I don't have such problems. In Turkey, I lost electricity like, I don't know, 5 times a week. Here in America, not once since I came here. This is like the first time during a live stream. Are you kidding me? What the hell? Maybe Mormonism is the one true church after all. I don't know. Heavenly Father interfered. That's what's going on. Wow, my internet is gone. This is so funny. This is hilarious. I'm so shocked right now. I'm serious. I got used to losing electricity in Turkey like every single week. Every day I was prepared for it. And here in America it never happened. And I was like, yeah, this is the West, man. And now it suddenly happened and I have no idea why. This is so funny. Wow. I'm really shocked and surprised right now. I'm just kind of sad that I lost her. Where is she? I should get her back. I should get her back to at least say bye-bye. This is funny. This is funny. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know I should use a backup power supply option. The thing is, I never did it because I'm not rich. Unfortunately, Islamophobia doesn't make you rich, which is very sad. But wait, I think Lex is here. Oh, there she is. Wait a minute. Hi.
I liked that last thing you said. That made me laugh.
Hey. Which one?
Islamophobia does not make you rich, unfortunately.
Well, that's an accusation that I always got, which is like, you're doing this for money. You're getting all the money with this, and like, what are you talking about, man? I can't even like afford some basic energy here. This is so funny. So, I don't know what I'm gonna do if I'm gonna wait till my well, the electricity is back up again, but it just the internet shuts off and I have to wait for it to go back on. So, but yeah, what was I saying? I don't know. It's all messed up now.
We're talking about Warren Jeffs, the FLDS prophet.
Oh yeah, I was saying. I know. I'm just continuing right now. I don't even know if this is if this even sounds or looks good, but yeah, I know. I was saying that it's funny that there is like a crime ring or a fundamentalist religious group that actually that practices polygamy, not only polygamy but also where young girls are being married off and mistreated, and where there is even more of an extremist cultist behavior or community, and the government cracking down on them is then just seen as discrimination because this is our religion, these are our rights. How dare you come after us? And that's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny. It reminds me of about some Muslim practices. When we talk about them being wrong or illegal or all that, then we get kind of the same response. We say that when they say this is Islamophobia, this is our religion, these are our rights, and
yeah.
There's an interesting parallel there.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see it with their early church too, and I mean, we're taught a lot that we were like very, very persecuted and that people hated us for no reason. And it's true that there were certain things that happened to Mormons that were absolutely not okay, and that they definitely, were treated very badly. But we were taught that it was kind of, people were just mean. People just didn't like us, and there was no good reason. When in reality, Joseph Smith was marrying teenage girls and, doing really bad things. And when he was called out for it, he was burning down printing presses and committing treason. And, so a lot of Mormons, they think that Joseph Smith was a martyr who died because people were just mean, when in reality, Joseph Smith was making a lot of really terrible choices and making a lot of enemies. But for us, we thought it was just discrimination. People are just mean and they don't like us because they're just, possessed by Satan. I assume that it's the same for a lot of FLDS people today.
Yeah. One thing that I'm curious about that I was also wondering when I was watching that show is so I understand that Joseph Smith is there at the beginning making up revelations as he goes and pretending to, I don't know, translate some tablets that he apparently found and that were then conveniently taken away. But wasn't his wife Emma also with him from like the beginnings of his revelations? And if Joseph Smith, made up this religion really as he went, was Emma basically also just in it, knowing that he's making it up and she's just making it up with him? Or do you think she was just duped by his?
It's hard to know because there's certain things that, you would think that she would have seen and noticed, but at the same time, people were very, very superstitious back then. So, I mean, there's the possibility she was going along with it because she thought it would be great if Joseph did have power, influence, and money. But there's also the possibility that she believed that he really was a prophet. And at the time, I mean, he didn't start the religion until he was older, but he then later went back and said, oh yeah, like God spoke to me when I was 14 years old and revealed the truth to me. And so he kind of like made up this whole like, yes, my backstory, like my beginnings as a prophet. And so, I mean, I don't know what Emma would have truly believed about it, but by the end of it, she obviously didn't agree with what Joseph was doing one way or another.
How is it when you compare the importance or the priority levels of Joseph Smith and Jesus and God? I don't know. Okay, not Heavenly Father. Let's leave it at Joseph Smith and Jesus. Is there do you think in practice Mormons care much more about Joseph Smith than about Jesus, or is there like a similarity? Are they similar in level, or how is it?
So Mormons worship Jesus, and they would definitely say like we do not worship Joseph Smith, even though in some ways it appears that they do. And when I was a Mormon, I would have been like, oh no, like Jesus is, we worship Jesus. He is our savior and redeemer. Whereas Joseph Smith was just sort of the tool by which the church was organized. But the thing that's interesting is that Joseph Smith back then claimed that he did more than Jesus did because Jesus's followers left him, but the Mormons stuck with Joseph Smith. So even though Mormons would say like, oh no, like Jesus is much better, Joseph Smith considered himself right up there.
So he actually said that?
He actually said that. He said that he has done more for the church than even Jesus did because Jesus's followers left him, but the Mormons have not left me yet.
So funny. That reminds me of a satire article from a while back about Donald Trump, because he said at some point, "I did more for religion and Christianity in general than anybody else," and then. Of course, the typical hyperbolic speech, and then I think the Babylon Bee was like satirized him and said something like, Donald Trump says, "I did more for Christianity than Jesus." And
that's funny parallel.
but it's funny that in Joseph Smith's case, it's actually him actually saying that he did more.
Yeah.
It's very funny. But so it seems like he. I guess as the guy who restores the one true religion, and who brings people all these new revelations and all that, he has some huge importance within Mormonism, and I don't know, people just accept him as another guy that you must follow in order to be truthful, right?
Right.
And what is their whole perspective of? So we talked about Mormonism being seen by Mormons as a restoration of the truth. Does that mean that people believe that that the scripture which Christians have is not entirely authentic, or that it has been corrupted, or does it just mean that Christians in their minds that misunderstood their religion or something like that?
So they believe that so in their like hierarchy of what's most important, they believe the Book of Mormon is the truest book on earth and that it trumps the Bible. They do believe that the Bible is true, only the King James Version. But they also say that we believe the Bible is true as far as it is translated correctly. So they believe that there are errors, or there could be errors. And so they don't abide by the Bible the same way that they would the Book of Mormon, although they do view them as both very important.
Well, funny. Still, they're closer to accepting the scripture than Muslims are. Well, Muslims are supposed to. Muslims say that the Torah and the Gospel and some other book called the Zabur, which people assume are the Psalms, which makes no sense, were originally revealed by Allah, but that they got that Jews and Christians corrupted their message, which is why those books are not applicable any longer and should be disregarded. And now only the Quran is the only true authoritative book sent by Allah. So that's what Muslims believe. And it seems like Mormons have a very similar belief, but at least they still kind of accept somewhat the authenticity of the actual Bible.
They do. And I mean, the funny thing is that like within the church, if Mormons were to discuss it, they would, you know, very much be more on the side of like the Book of Mormon being the keystone of the religion, the most important, you know, high up on a pedestal. But they also at the same time would be like, if they were to speak to somebody who was a Christian and perhaps was an investigator of the church, they would be like, oh no, like we absolutely believe the Bible is just as important as the Book of Mormon. We believe in both. Like, don't you worry, we're not crazy. You know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like within the church, within Mormon groups, the Book of Mormon is definitely seen as more true, but to the outside world, they like to portray themselves as being very, very accepting of both. And they wouldn't want anybody to think that they place more importance on the Book of Mormon.
Did you read the Book of Mormon through? Is that like something that the average Mormon does?
Yes. They oftentimes have like, I mean, so within the church, when you are growing up, you go to something called seminary when you're in high school, which every year of high school, you would be learning about either the Book of Mormon, the New Testament, the Old Testament, or the Doctrine and Covenants, which is scripture that Joseph Smith wrote. So you would read it through for that class. And then, you know, as you get older, every year within church, you would, you know, again, focus on like a different aspect. And the prophet oftentimes will have like challenges where he'll be like, I challenge everybody to read the Book of Mormon between now and our next conference in 6 months, or I challenge everybody to read the Book of Mormon this year, or, you know, things like that. They have those sort of things happening all the time. So most Mormons have read the Book of Mormon cover to cover at least once, but if you're like a good Mormon, you would have done it several times. And when I was a Mormon, I read it a lot of times, and I would even read, like, sit and listen to it as my audiobook instead of like picking new audiobooks and consuming new information. I would just listen to the Book of Mormon on repeat.
Well, that's good. I mean, the average Muslim doesn't even open the Quran, so.
Yeah, they place a lot of emphasis on it.
Yeah, I know many Muslims will say, no, how can you say that we recite the Quran every day? Well, what Muslims do is if they pray, then they recite several verses which they are supposed to memorize, very short ones, to do the prayers. But most Muslims actually never open and read the Quran in a language that they understand. So it's impressive that Mormons actually read the book.
They do. It's very, very important within the church.
That's good. I'm sold. I'm gonna convert to Mormonism. Just kidding. I'm still worried about my internet. It's still not back, so I'm still kind of stuck here. I want to do a nice section where I kind of compare a few of the things, but I guess I can do it off the top of my head. So we talked about one thing that stuck out to me was thought crimes. Controlling your mind, basically everything you think. It's very much Muhammad did the same thing. and you're supposed to, whenever you have a thought, you're supposed to a thought that might challenge Allah. Like there is a certain report, for example, where he says the devil comes to you and asks you who created this and who created that, and in the end he asks you who created Allah. If he does that, then seek refuge with Allah and immediately abstain from such thoughts and things like that. I mean, you're supposed to just always check what you're thinking and do the right thing. You're supposed to dress a certain way, walk a certain way, talk a certain way. You are supposed to regard all the others as wrong and corrupt ones, and only believe what Muhammad himself says, only accept his stuff as true, always doubt the Christians and the Jews, always doubt their messages and everything. He had multiple wives. Joseph Smith had multiple wives. He married a child. Joseph Smith married children. There is a lot of hate for others. One thing that I want to ask, there are 4 tribes mentioned in the Book of Mormon, right? Is it 4 tribes, or how is that?
Do you mean like the Nephites and the Lamanites?
Yeah.
Referencing
Like,
there, I mean, I think there's more than that, but those are like the 2 main ones.
okay. And is that the ones that originally settled in America, and the Lamanites
Yeah.
are the Native Americans?
Yeah,
And
the Nephites would have been like the good people for the most part, and the Lamanites would have been the bad ones. But like I said, they kind of, I mean, the Book of Mormon is very repetitive. And so a lot of the same stuff like continues to happen. There'll be like a war and it'll only leave one side. And, you know, and then the good people will turn white and the bad people will turn dark, and then it'll happen again. And, you know, it kind of goes all over the place. And at the end of the book, it ends up being the Lamanites that sort of win out. And so then they believe that all the Lamanites that were left in the Americas are the ancestors of Native Americans.
oh, bro.
Yeah.
Well, you said the Book of Mormon is very repetitive. That's another thing that the Book of Mormon and the Quran have in common. The Quran is extremely repetitive, and I don't know. Maybe it's not as maybe it's even more boring than the Book of Mormon. Maybe the Book of Mormon is actually, I have never read it, so I can't say anything about that. Maybe I should do that. Do you suggest that I should read the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that long.
How long is it? I wanted to look at that up earlier, but
You know, I'm not sure of like the page number, but it's a thin book. It's not very long.
yeah. Well, some guy coming up with it while having a lot of sex is probably a hard job to do.
Well, and like huge portions of it are actually directly taken from the Bible as well. And so, I mean, he didn't write the entire thing, obviously.
What about white ancestors of people who survived today? Is there such a thing, or are all Mormons just regarded as people who, you know, is it historically accurate that people just traveled from Europe here? There is no leftover good guy in America. How does that work?
I mean, all of the Native Americans that are here, they would basically believe came from the Lamanites, which at the end of the book were like the bad ones. Everybody else, I mean, there's no mention of anybody else because the book ends at that point.
Well, that's funny. There was a massacre that is mentioned in the show, and that I've also seen prominently mentioned in criticism of Mormon history. Remind me, Meadows.
Mountain Meadows Massacre.
Yeah. What was that about, and what's its significance to Mormon history? Can you say something about that?
So that's something that I didn't really know anything about till after I left the church. I'd heard the name before, but I thought that it was like somebody had attacked the Mormons, where it actually turns out that it was the Mormons that attacked a group that was traveling through Utah. And I mean, it was like the name implies, it was a massacre. They had a group of Mormons, which they had a few natives join them as well, but a lot of them painted their faces or like put mud on their faces to make them appear like they were natives, and attacked a group of people that was trying to travel through Utah. And there's a lot of like controversy around who actually ordered that attack. Some people believe that it was Brigham Young, the prophet, while others believe that it wasn't. And I mean, one way or another, it was a massacre committed by Mormons against innocent people.
Wow, so much for honesty. So, the idea, I guess, was that the propaganda was that these people were outsiders who are not supposed to be in Mormon land, and that this is how Mormons would deal with outsiders who try to invade their land.
Yeah.
And just to send a message, and it's actually caused the opposite. It's caused a lot of hate and reaction from the government.
Right. And again, it's like, I mean, I don't know. You think about it, and it's like there's no good reason for something like that to happen, and particularly for something like that to happen, under the observation of prominent, leader type Mormons, is a militia, and there were men, women, and children, and they killed everybody. I think that they might have actually taken a few of the children, the youngest ones that weren't going to like remember anything, but it's just awful. And again, something that most Mormons don't really know anything about.
Yeah, I think as far as I remember, what I remember from it, what I read about it, is that it is in Mormon history depicted as a heroic thing, only if it is ever mentioned. And a few people from the opposing side survived, just children. And yeah, but the whole thing of painting their faces and making themselves appear as if they were Native Americans, and then attacking the innocent people. I mean, is that acceptable behavior from the saints? So,
right, the people who call themselves saints, the only true church in the world. Yeah, it's pretty messed up.
Yeah, well, that is pretty messed up. So, but how is it? One final thing that I want to mention. So I often hear people say, "Well, at least Mormons are very nice people, and very good and very welcoming, and I would rather have a Mormon neighbor and stuff like that." And I guess the image that Mormons give to the world, or to others, is that they're just very devout, observant, but very nice, welcoming people, and all that. I don't want to. I don't know what you want to say about that. What would be your perspective on that statement, and how do you think Mormons actually feel about outsiders?
I would say that for the most part, I mean, like I said, I grew up Mormon and my entire family is Mormon, right? And my family, the people that I associated with on a regular basis, I do feel like they are generally very good people who have been misled. And, the really awful parts about their history and, the doctrine and that stuff, that didn't come from the average lay member. That came from the higher ups. And so I think for the most part, yes, most Mormons, most average Mormons are just good people doing their best. But obviously, I do see problems within Mormon culture that arise, between the people. Sometimes Mormons can be incredibly judgmental. I myself, as a Mormon, was very judgmental against anybody who had tattoos, anybody who had body piercings, anybody who, openly swore or drank coffee or drank alcohol or was gay, or there's so many things that within Mormonism are considered sinful, like so many. So as much as like I think that they are generally nice people, I also think they're conditioned to see the outside world as bad, as evil, as just worldly and sinful, and they're conditioned a lot of times to have a lot of judgment for those people. but then disguise it as love. So, I mean, I can see it from both perspectives, but I would say that as they're not going around trying to be bad people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, that was good enough. Makes sense. Um, I guess I should read the Book of Mormon and then make an analysis of what is better, the Book of Mormon or the Quran. I'm really tempted to do that right now.
That would be
But
very interesting. You should.
I don't know if such a comparison exists anywhere. But if you just because I heard you say on a video that people notice that you are not a Mormon if you walk around in a Mormon community. Like the way that you look right now, if you walked among Mormons, would it be obvious that you are not a Mormon?
Yes, it would.
Why? Why?
It would probably be the extra piercings. Mormons are only allowed to have one piercing in each earlobe, and I've got several on both ears, and I also have a nose ring, which is not allowed. And then having an upside down cross would be a dead giveaway as well. But other than that, I mean, like with my arms covered, you can't tell. But if I was wearing a sleeveless top, you would see my tattoo. If I had my hair up, you'd see a tattoo behind my ear. All of those types of things are like obvious, like that's not a Mormon.
Wow. And what about ACDC?
Yeah, my mom always said that ACDC was basically of the devil, so that might be another one.
Of course. But what does it mean that something is not allowed? So if you say that you're not allowed to have multiple piercings like that, but only one, um, what exactly is meant by not allowed? What does it imply?
So the prophet asked Mormons to not have more than one ear piercing, I think in the 90s. And so anything that the prophet asks you to do or not do is going to be a rule. And that one actually is not an unwritten rule. That one's a written rule. It's not going to get you kicked out of the church. But depending on who your own personal bishop is, it could get you, it could keep you from entering the temple. He might ask you to take out the extra piercings and repent. But then there's other bishops that might let it slide. It kind of depends on your bishop. They call it the leadership roulette because sometimes there's some that are, a little bit more easygoing and relaxed, and there's others that are very strict. But multiple ear piercings would be under the category of not allowed, and it could also earn you a lot of judgment from other members.
That is funny. This reminds me of one thing that I found very shocking, weird, disgusting when I first looked into all the reports of Muhammad, where there is actually an instance where the Prophet Muhammad is approached by a woman, and she says, "O Prophet, my daughter is very sick and her hair is falling out. I want to attach, artificial hair to her hair. Am I allowed to do this?" And Muhammad turns around and says, "Allah cursed the one who does this and the one who has it done. So therefore it is absolutely cursed and not allowed to use hair extension." And,
Interesting.
and
It sounds like
what?
a very arbitrary rule, which is very
Yeah,
familiar.
yeah. So I don't know that's why it's funny. That's why when things like these and the whole cultish attitude, um, how the church formed, how Joseph Smith lived, how he made up things as he went, as he wanted. Seeing all these things just made me think, like my first impression of Mormonism after I actually looked into it was, wow, this is like the American Islam. uh,
They would absolutely hate to hear you say that.
why? Do you, yeah, why?
I would say from my time in the church, growing up in Utah in a very conservative area, there was a lot of hatred of Islam. of very much seeing it as very evil. The way that they see Christianity as people who are misled and don't have the full truth. I don't think that they view Islam that way. They would view it as much more of like, that is evil and wrong and terrible and bad. And maybe that's changed in the last 15 to 20 years. But when I was growing up in the church, that's very much the way it was.
Wow. That's interesting. I had no idea about that. Wow. Yeah, no, this was very this was extremely interesting. I do have, oh yeah, before I forget that, I do have a few questions here that some people asked. Stop Scamming Man said, I'm curious to know, when you were a Mormon, did you try to rationalize their view of history by speculating not all Native Americans were Israelite?
No, I just swallowed that one hook, line, and sinker. I never questioned that. I was like, oh yeah, like of course, that makes perfect sense.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's funny. How does it impact your view on, I mean, if you are a Mormon and you are aware of these things, how does that impact your view of Native Americans casually in general?
As a Mormon, I learned that it's not like they were Lamanites anymore. They were no longer, I thought that they had sort of changed a lot, like very, very dramatically from the time that the Book of Mormon was written till present day. And so, I did believe that they were the ancestors of the people we read about in the Book of Mormon, but it didn't really affect the way I viewed them very much.
I see. One thing that just came to my mind related to that is the whole idea of the New Zion or New Jerusalem or New Israel, whatever that is that's an idea by Joseph Smith, right? That the Mormon land or America is basically a New Zion.
Yeah. I don't know how much you know about Joseph Smith's view on all of that, but he did believe and taught, and Mormons still do teach or still believe, that when Jesus returns, he will return to the Americas, and it will actually be in Missouri, a place called Adamondiaman. And they have the church has bought land in that area, and they believe that that is where Jesus will return to. So, the more you know.
And the church will, of course, welcome Jesus there when he returns.
Yes. There were teachings for a while that, someday, the saints had been pushed out to Utah, but someday the prophet would call all the saints to return to Missouri, to be there when Christ returned. And obviously, I think that's kind of been pushed to the back burner. I think that the leaders of the church have realized that that's probably not reality. So they haven't talked about that in a while, but it was a very prominent Mormon teaching at one point.
Yeah, they got kicked out, and Illinois was also of significance, right? And isn't that where he got killed?
Yeah. He was, I'm trying to remember, Nauvoo is where I think the saints had eventually settled before they moved to, let's see. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember if it was, I think that Carthage was in Nauvoo, and that's where Joseph died. But Missouri was also very significant. Okay.
We talked about this before, but Stop Scamming Man asked at the very beginning and said, does the magic underwear work? What do you mean work?
Do they actually protect you? The funny thing is that you would hear, the whole protection thing was supposed to be protection against Satan and temptation and stuff like that. But a lot of Mormons would tell stories about I know of somebody, my, second cousin's ex-boyfriend's so-and-so that got it was, burned in a fire, but everywhere that his garments were touching, he was fine. So there were stories like that all the time.
Yeah, it would be funny if they protected you from bullets or something.
I'm pretty sure there's stories like that too, all that kind of stuff.
This is funny. It reminds me of how Muslims talk about jinns. So Muslims believe in jinns who are invisible beings made of fire who exist alongside humans at all times. Not like demons in Abrahamic religion, but they're actually like a parallel society of people. And you will always hear in some Muslim environment somebody say, I know somebody whose father's something actually saw a jinn and interacted with him, and it's always somebody else. It's never the person themselves.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah. Mormons have a belief about the three Nephites, who they believe are like people from the Book of Mormon who still live on Earth today. And they have stories like that too, where my uncle or my, great grandfather or somebody met the three Nephites and he helped them fix a flat tire or something like that.
Wow, that's funny. Debodro said, wondering what they thought of people with vitiligo. Were they redeeming themselves? Wow.
I've never heard that before, but I kind of wonder if a Mormon prophet in like the 60s would have seen somebody with that. He might have thought that.
Yeah, I wonder what Joseph Smith would have said. He would be like, oh, what is going on here? Maybe he would have been confused. I don't know. Varun said it feels like Mormonism is Ismailism of Christianity, but that doesn't make sense to me. Ismailism. So Ismailism is a branch within Islam that is like that has become an offshoot, and where they have their own guy right now who receives semi-revelations and stuff, and they are kind of cultish too. Not as much as Mormonism probably, but I don't understand with Christianity. But yeah, no, yeah, definitely. Mormonism has a lot of cultish stuff. Kalilian said ultra crepidarian apple polish. This is an insider joke. Ultra crepidarian apple polishing charlatans, because that's what somebody said about us and ex-Muslims. But yeah. All right. Well, this was very interesting. Lex, thank you so much for all the information, for everything that we have gotten out here. Thanks everybody for viewing. I'm sorry that I'm in this state. I just got a message from my from Xfinity, and they told me that my internet will not be available, and they're trying to solve it till 9:50, which is of course very funny. It's currently 8:50 here. So anyway, that's what I'm dealing with. But anyway, I guess we will end it with this. So this was a very interesting conversation. I really loved this. I could go on talking about Mormonism forever. I think I'm very interested, and I think I see a lot of parallels, and so will many others. What are your final thoughts, Lex?
I thought this was very interesting too. It's really interesting hearing out about the parallels between Islam and Mormonism, especially because of the way Islam was talked about when I was growing up as a Mormon. And I would have hated to hear that they were similar in any way, because I wouldn't have believed it if you had told me that. But yeah, I mean, I think Mormonism, for being such a young religion, there's so much to it, and there's so much to the history. It is so convoluted that it's, I mean, I feel like even being out of the church for almost 4 years, I'm still learning about it. There's still like new bits of information that I hear about that just shock me.
Yeah. Well. I just think if I see a Mormon, no, I'm just tempted to tell them, hey, your religion is just like Islam.
You ever do tell me what they say?
Just kidding. No, thank you so much, Lex. For everyone who wants to hear more from you about your experiences, you have a channel known as Ex-Mo-Lex, right? And where can people find you?
I'm on both YouTube and TikTok as Ex-Mo-Lex, and I upload every week on YouTube, talking about different aspects of Mormonism, comparing it to, the Bite model, learning more about it as a cult, more about the history and things like that. So check it out if you're interested more about Mormonism.
Wonderful. I suggest that too. I subscribed to your channel, Ex-Mo-Lex, and I find it very interesting. And I suggest everybody who is interested in this stuff, go ahead and subscribe as well. I wish you all the best, Lex. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thanks everybody for listening. Have a fantastic day and stay away from Islam. I always say, but today I also want to say, hey, maybe you can say that part. I can say stay away from Islam. Okay, I'll say it. Stay away from Islam. Now you
Stay
maybe
away from Islam.
you can say stay away from Mormonism.
Stay away from Mormonism and Islam.
Wow. Okay, that's extra. That was good. Thank you. Okay, bye everybody. Thanks.